Imagine this, the year 1942, the most terrifying year in our country's history. The Germans are pushing toward Stalingrad and the oil fields of the Caucasus. Every week, dozens, hundreds of tanks roll off the assembly lines in the Urals and Siberia. And the main hope, the icon, the symbol of resistance is, of course, the T-34. In films, it appears invincible. In veterans' memoirs, it is a savior. But what if I told you that at the very moment when our grandfathers and great-grandfathers were making their desperate stand in these machines across the ocean, in the quiet offices of the secret Aberdeen Proving Ground, a team of America's finest engineers was meticulously disassembling an identical T-34 and were horrified. Their verdict was shocking. This machine is a technological dead end. It lags behind in every parameter. And the most unbelievable part? They wanted to fix it. They sat down and wrote an entire list. Guys, here's how you should do it. And that list was sent to Moscow. What was on it? And why do we know so little about it? Let's step into that atmosphere. Lend-Lease. America wasn't yet a full ally but, as they said back then, a co-belligerent. They supplied us with canned meat, gunpowder, aluminum, and Studebaker trucks. And now came a request from the USSR. Here are our newest tanks. Study them and give us your opinion. For the Americans, this was a gift from fate. They weren't yet fully engaged in ground combat. Their mission was to become the arsenal of democracy, to understand which equipment worked and which didn't. So two beasts from the Eastern Front arrived at the Maryland Proving Ground, the medium T-34 and the heavy KV-1. To engineers from General Motors and Chrysler, these machines were like alien spacecraft. They approached them with measuring instruments and benchmarks from their own industry, and their first impression was awe. They saw those famous sloped armor plates. Brilliantly simple, a genuine breakthrough. A German shell hitting at an angle would likely ricochet. Structurally, it was brilliant. They praised the very concept. But then they took out hardness testers, examined fractures, and began analyzing the metal's microstructure. And their admiration turned to bewilderment, and then to shock. Armor. A brilliant idea executed with a sledgehammer. Here's what they wrote in their report in plain terms: you guys came up with an amazing shape, but the material is terrible. They discovered that the quality of the armor's hardening, especially on those 45mm side and front plates, was extremely uneven. Imagine a loaf of bread with a hard crust but soft inside. That's roughly how Soviet armor was structured, according to them. In one spot, it could withstand a hit. In another, it shattered like glass. Why? Here, a bit of historical context is needed. We often think of industrialization merely as building factories. But industrialization is, above all, a culture of production, standards, tolerances, heat treatment. By 1941, the Soviet Union had only been industrialized for about 20 years. Yes, they'd built Uralmash, yes, they'd evacuated the Kharkiv plant to the Urals. But technological discipline, the secrets of properly hardening high-quality steel, is something that takes decades to master. By that time, America had already spent 50 years as the world's leading industrial power. Steel companies like Bethlehem Steel knew armor inside and out. Their suggestion hit like a whip. Abandon your through hardening process. Switch to surface hardening, case hardening. What does that mean? They proposed making the armor plate thicker at its core so internal stresses wouldn't crack it, but hardening only the outer layer, just a couple of centimeters deep. That surface would become incredibly hard, shattering shells on impact, while the softer core would absorb energy and prevent cracking. Result? With the same or even less armor thickness, protection would increase by 50 to 100%. And the tank's weight would drop. Less weight meant longer life for the engine, transmission, and tracks. This was the first item on their How to Fix the T-34 list. Engine killer from the air. Now let's move to the harshest point. One that reportedly cost several Soviet officials their positions. The air filters. The Aberdeen engineers wrote bluntly, "These filters are utterly unsuitable for dusty or sandy road conditions. Their efficiency is close to zero." Picture the heart of the T-34, its legendary V2 diesel engine. 12 cylinders, 500 horsepower, reliable and robust. Now imagine that heart forced to pump thick clouds of dust instead of clean air. Abrasive particles of sand and soil act like sandpaper inside the cylinders. Pistons, rings, cylinder walls, all worn to powder within mere tens of engine hours. The Americans, who already had vast experience operating machinery in dusty prairies and North African deserts, their troops were already fighting Rommel, simply threw up their hands. How do you even drive this thing? They offered their own systems, cyclonic or oil bath Vicron filters capable of capturing up to 98% of dust. This wasn't just an improvement, it was salvation. And indeed, according to some sources, it was precisely after this transatlantic kick that the USSR urgently copied and launched production of new filters, later installed on the T-34-85 and post-war tanks. A bitter pill, but effective medicine. Running gear, Christie's beloved child and his curse. Now we reach the most intriguing and personally sensitive for Soviet designers, the Christie suspension. The very system that, in the 1930s, had been secretly purchased at great personal and professional risk from the eccentric American genius John Walter Christie. The very system that allowed the T-34 to remove its tracks and drive briefly on wheels along highways. In the USSR, it was considered revolutionary, the secret of the tank's mobility. So what did the Americans write about it in 1942? They tore it apart. Why? Because they knew it intimately, they'd already used it and abandoned it by then. They wrote, "Yes, it gives large will travel, but it's bulky, consumes valuable interior space, is complex to manufacture and maintain, and demands near virtuoso driving skill to avoid breaking it on rough terrain." Instead, they proposed two alternatives. First, torsion bars. A springy steel rod runs inside the hull. One end is fixed to the hull, the other to the roadwheel arm. Compact, reliable, smooth ride. Second, a final drive type system, more complex but incredibly effective. Their verdict: switch to torsion bars. You'll immediately gain interior volume, which means crew survivability, smoother ride, greater reliability, and reduced weight. Imagine Moscow's reaction. Having once bought American know-how, they were now being told by those same Americans, "Your know-how is junk. Here's our new know-how. Take it." It was a blow to national pride. Controls. This isn't technology, it's torture. That phrase from the Aberdeen report became legendary. And it wasn't about the tank as a whole, but specifically about how it was driven. An American driver, accustomed to his Sherman's ergonomic levers and synchronized transmissions, yes, late-model Shermans even had semi-automatic gearboxes, would sit at the T-34's controls and realize he needed the arms of a weightlifter and the reflexes of a race car driver. The main problem? Side clutches. To turn, the driver had to pull a lever to disengage one track, overcoming enormous physical resistance. Shifting gears on the move required tremendous strength and precise timing to mesh the gears. The Americans wrote, "You force the driver to be both a dock worker and a watchmaker at the same time. Under combat stress, this leads to mistakes and breakdowns." Their solution was simple and elegant. Install a more advanced transmission and abandon side clutches entirely in favor of double differentials or hydraulic servos. Make steering effortless, they urged. You'll dramatically improve battlefield maneuverability and cut driver training time from 6 months to 2. This wasn't just an engineering issue, it was wartime economics. Personnel mattered, and faster crew training meant more tanks could be fielded. Production culture, the bitterest truth. But the Americans' most fundamental criticism wasn't about specific parts, it was about philosophy. They pointed to a weak overall production culture. They wrote, "Inside the tank, we see brilliant engineering ideas executed with appalling crudeness. Rough surfaces on components, huge manufacturing tolerances, parts could vary by a few millimeters and still be jammed into place. Poor gear finishing. Why did the T-34's turret need an electric motor to rotate? Because manual turning was impossible due to misalignment." All this, the Americans concluded, negated the advantages of an otherwise brilliant design. The tank didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because it was built crudely. Their final judgment: your tanks don't lose to ours in concept, but in reliability, manufacturability, and crew ergonomics. Conclusion: a bitter gift of fate. So, in 1942, this report landed on the desk of the Soviet High Command. What to do? Listen to the Allies? Admit that their Sherman or the still-in-development Pershing was technologically superior?
Idéologically impossible.
The war raged. Assembly lines ran non-stop. Halting production for deep modernization would have been suicidal. They needed thousands of tanks now, not hundreds of perfect ones tomorrow. So they acted like true pragmatists. They quickly implemented changes that didn't require halting production. Slightly improved commander visibility, new air filters, gradual armor quality upgrades. But a complete redesign? No. The T-34 remained what it was. Harsh, demanding on drivers, technologically crude, but mass-producible, field-reparable, and devastatingly effective in its simplicity. And therein lies the great paradox and the great lesson. The American report was fundamentally correct, pinpointed every weakness, and Soviet designers did take it into account, but not in 1942. After the war, look at the T-54, the T-62. What do you see? Rolled homogeneous armor of the highest quality? Check. Powerful air filters? Absolutely.
Torsion barre suspension?
Yes. Ergonomic controls? Of course. Everything the Americans recommended in 42 was implemented in the 50s. The USSR walked that technological path, but at its own pace and with its own sacrifices. So, was the T-34 an outdated tank? By specific technical metrics, yes, absolutely. But as a weapon system, as a factor in the war, as a symbol, it was perfect for its time and circumstances. It was a soldier tank. Unpretentious, resilient, capable of taking a mortal blow and delivering one in return. And the American report became that tough but honest lesson from a more experienced colleague. One that helped Soviet tank design become among the world's strongest in the decades that followed. What do you think? Did Soviet leadership make the right call by largely ignoring these suggestions during the war? Or was it a crime against their own tank crews? Leave your opinion in the comments. Yes, if you believe they should have listened to the Allies and urgently redesigned the tank, or no, if you think their decision was correct and the tank was optimal for those conditions. Heated debates are welcome, and be sure to subscribe because ahead, we've got many more deep dives where myths collide with documents. Like this video if you found it interesting, and tell me in the comments which other legendary weapon you'd like me to investigate next. See you soon.